Hey everybody, thanks for joining us for the Extended Size North American Kids Shaping the Future of Fit webinar. We're going to get started in just a couple minutes. I just had a couple housekeeping notes. My name is Jordan Huggins. I am the marketing manager here at Alvanon. I will be your moderator today. If you have any questions or concerns or IT issues, shoot me a message or question or chat in your GoToWebinar interface. There is a toggle, chat, questions, polls. Just wanted to draw your attention to that. We will be distributing some polls here in just a second. If you have any questions, please submit those for our live Q&A at the end of this webinar for the speakers. Before we get started, we're going to wait a couple of minutes for people to join. I'd just like to go ahead and submit some polls. Please take your time to fill those out. Just a couple of questions that we have for you guys. We just want to know a little bit more about you. All right, and we have one more question for you guys. And while you're taking the time to fill that out, we'll go ahead and get started. Thank you guys so much for joining us for the Shaping the Future Fit Extended Size North American Kids webinar. My name is Jordan Huggins. Again, I am the marketing manager at Alvanon, and I will be your moderator today. We have a poll up on the screen just while I finish these introductions and housekeeping, if you guys wouldn't mind filling that out. For those of you not familiar with Alvanon, we are a global apparel technology company focused on the body and its application and implications in the apparel industry. We don't make clothes, we help brands make clothes fit better, have efficient and sustainable processes, and train their people better. We are, as we like to say, the science behind the art of fit. Alvanon got its start in 2000, redefining the standards used for kidswear. Our founder, Dr. Kenneth Wang, knew the standards in the marketplace didn't match the children he saw coming into his medical practice day in and day out. Since the original standards, we've used data to evolve standards and tools for the apparel industry. And actually, in 2018, some of you may have been and joined us for that webinar. We released the Alvanon Standard North American Kids. This webinar and the Extended Size North American Kids is a follow-up to that series. I'm going to go ahead and close this poll. Thank you guys so much for voting. Before I introduce you to today's speakers, I have a few housekeeping notes I wanted to run through real quick. Today's presentation will run about 30 minutes. We're going to leave plenty of time for a live Q&A with Emily and Alice after the webinar. So you're more than welcome to post any questions you have for the speakers. You can do that in your GoToWebinar panel under the questions. You just toggle that and submit the questions to us. And I will do my best to ask all of your questions. If we can't get through all the questions today, don't worry. The webinar is being recorded and we have a log of your questions, and we will distribute the recording of the webinar as well as the questions, and we will give Emily and Alice time to answer those questions. And I'll give you those answers, the questions, the answers, and the recording of the webinar after the end of the webinar. So if you experience any technical difficulties during the presentation, you can reach out to me directly through the chat box, and I'll do my best to help you. Now, without any further ado, I'd like to go ahead and introduce you to today's speakers. We have Alice Rodrigues. She joined Alvanon in 2011 after spending over 35 years in the apparel industry in both line and management positions. Her expertise encompasses garment construction, pattern making, and fit development, in addition to product development and technical design. And then I'd like to introduce Emily Robertson-Hood. For over 20 years, Emily has led teams of engineers, QA, pattern makers, graders, and technical developers in the fit, construction, and global manufacturing of apparel products, ranging from denim to down. Now, enough from me. Alice, Emily, why don't you guys take it away?
Thank you so much, Jordan. Thank you all for joining us as we go into this holiday weekend in the United States and the UK. It's great that you could carve out time to be with us. So when we talk about extended sizes, or when we talk about any topic at Alvanon, what we really like to do is get everybody on the same page and start with a definition. So by extended sizes, we're referring to children whose size and body shape fall outside the body parameters used for standard sized kids wear. So the Husky and Plus are meant for larger girth and heavier weight boys and girls, while Slim is meant for smaller girth, lighter body weight boys and girls. And in particular, naming for Husky and Plus is debatable and probably needs rethinking. What's not debatable is the significant market out there for kids requiring these options in their apparel sizing. Parents of Plus or Husky kids are often frustrated by the lack of options for their kids. In polls, we've seen that 34% of parents say there's a poor selection of clothing in their child's size. 30% complain that the merchandise lacks variety, and another 30% say that the clothing is overpriced. And though they rely on workarounds like buying bigger size standard sizes that are wide enough, but they can often be too long. Most parents do buy kid sizes with some anticipation of growth. However, a garment that is vastly out of proportion for the child does not work, and research is finding that it may negatively affect the child's self-image. So consequently, customer disappointment may actually be skewing sales numbers, leading brands to believe that there's less demand for extended sizes than there really is. As we saw for standard size kids wear, there's clearly this disconnect between actual kids today, what their bodies are, what their shapes are, and what's available in the marketplace. This issue is magnified for extended size kids. Fortunately, there's data to support sizing evolution, if not revolution. Alice is going to walk us through Alvanon's process for guiding sizing evolution.
Thanks, Emily. What we found, we'll walk you through what we did and how we arrived at our conclusions. First, we surveyed some children's wear key clients that we have. We listened to their feedback on the current standards, whether they're using off-the-rack standard forms or custom-developed bodies. We also asked them about their own challenges in fitting children's wear and what, if any, consumer feedback they've been hearing. We analyzed our own internal resources. We have our own proprietary scan data on kids, along with information from the Alva Kids app database. We also studied childhood development patterns using sources like the Centers for Disease Control and the World Health Organization, along with pediatric and medical studies. We compared all of the data we have and the information to the current standards, along with the input from the key clients to develop a commercially viable solution that's relevant for kids today. One thing that's clear is that extended sizes need to be aligned with the new kids standards, not just from a data standpoint, but from an operational standpoint as well. There are important things to understand about Plus as it relates to obesity and overweight. Worldwide, obesity has nearly tripled since 1975. 41 million children under the age of 5 were overweight or obese as of 2016, and over 340 million children and adolescents between 5 and 19 were overweight or obese at that time. Conversely, medically defined underweight children aren't typically found in North America, but slim children are. Extended sizing fit issues definitely need to be solved more effectively, especially considering the growing demand. The number of obese children and adolescents worldwide has risen tenfold in the past 4 decades. If this trend continues, more children will be obese than moderately or severely underweight by 2022. To better understand the shape profile of overweight and slim kids, we filtered the data based on a waist to height ratio. Japan has been monitoring this metric since 2008, and they have one of the lowest obesity and overweight rates in the world. The waist to height ratio also appears to be a better predictor of overweight or slim bodies than BMI. For our study, we used a waist to height ratio of greater than or equal to 52% for overweight kids. And for the slim kids, we used a ratio of less than or equal to 45%. We didn't focus on very overweight or extremely slim kids. What we found is the data corroborates the brand's observations on posture and stature distribution. Real body growth is not linear. What that means is that kids' limbs and torsos grow at different rates throughout their development, and they're changing shape at the same time. We also all know that the age-name correlation used in the United States doesn't really work, but there's little appetite to change it for logistical reasons. Most brands have worked around this by displaying height and weight on their size charts. The data and the medical research tells us that regardless of weight, the growth patterns of children are the same. From birth to about a year old, children tend to grow more in the torso than they do in the legs. Once they start becoming mobile, up to about puberty, they're growing more in the legs. We've all either seen or known kids at this age, and you look at them and you just think, oh my gosh, they're all arms and legs, and they're all gangly and kind of leggy and ungainly. And the medical data proves to us that what we see every day is true. They do get like that. Once they reach puberty, the torso begins to grow more rapidly again until they reach their adult height and proportions. What this chart tells us is that boys and girls grow at about the same rate in their early years. Then the girls start to take off and actually become a little taller than boys at around 10 to 12 years old. This is because they're beginning puberty earlier. Then the girls' growth slows down, and most of them are pretty much done growing by 14 or 15 years old. The boys continue to keep growing and become taller than the girls. What we found was that the overall feedback and the data about the standard kids in terms of size, posture, and proportions holds true for extended size kids as well. The measurements of current standards for Plus and Husky are small by most data and medical indicators and the brand feedback. The current slim standards are closer to the data for girth, but as with the standard in Plus kids, the slim standards are shorter than the data, especially in the middle childhood years. There's been a long-held misconception that Plus and Husky kids are shorter than average or slim kids, and this is not true. There's nothing in the data that supports this. There really is no correlation between height and size at any age. So the outcome of our research leads us to the new standards for Plus, Husky, and slim kids. Since age 12 is where the biggest divergence between genders begins, it's a good starting point for tween brands, and it's an obvious choice for visual comparison of Alvanon standard and extended size virtual bodies. You'll notice here with this regular, slim, and Plus girl that there are differences other than the size. On the Plus girl, even the head circumference is different and the face is fuller. Due to the way soft tissue increases when someone gains weight, the torso is also slightly longer. The slim girl isn't just thinner, she represents a girl with a slighter bone structure. You can also see that the Plus girl is a little more developed because the medical data tells us that girls who are overweight tend to start puberty sooner than slimmer girls. With the boys, you can see many of the same characteristics as the plus girls, being proportionately fuller through the middle with fuller faces. Within some ethnicities, boys may also start puberty earlier if they're overweight. Our slim boy, just like his slim sister, is also finer boned, not just skinnier than the average kid. Once we confirmed the core sizes, we needed to identify the optimal size ranges for the extended sizes. What we found is that currently very few brands seem to be offering styles in Plus or Husky in sizes smaller than about 7 or 8. The current standards that are available are offered in sizes beginning at 4 and offering those sizes 4, 5, and 6 in Plus and Husky that are proportioned correctly is a good solution. It's supported by the data that the kids are becoming bigger earlier. It also allows for age-appropriate styling. Some brands have also observed that parents have been buying up in size for their younger Plus or Husky kids because they can't find sizes that are big enough. As a consequence of this, kids end up in clothes that are way too long in order to get enough ease over body. Oops. Ugh, sorry about that, guys. Here you see the comparison of the slim, standard, and plus kids at age 4. You see the same differences in these bodies as with the size 12. Aside from the size difference, the plus is proportionately fuller through the middle with a fuller face, and the slim kid is finer boned and thinner overall. For some reason, my animations are not working. Here is the complete size range of plus girls from 4 to 18. The stature of all of these kids is the same as the standard kids at each size, and you can see the rapid growth spurt that happens at around age 8 up to about 12. What we found in the data is that the girths do not evolve in the same way on plus kids as they do on standard size kids. The plus and husky kids change more rapidly in the waist than the standard size kids. For the husky boys, we found that the growth pattern in the girth measurements is similar to the plus girls in that the waist is changing more rapidly than with average size kids. You can also see that the boys' growth spurt continues into their late teens. The other thing we did for both the boys and girls is upsize the top end of the range so that the older kids don't have to go into adult sizes, which may not fit them well or be age appropriate, and they usually cost more. For the slim kids, we use the same size range of 4 to 18. Just like with the plus and husky kids, the heights at each size are the same as the standard kids. What's interesting about the girth and shape evolution across the slim range is that slim kids do not change at the waist as quickly as standard size kids. You can see that the tummy is much flatter because the slim kids have less belly fat than even your average size kids at the 50th percentile, and that their heads, faces, and extremities are much slimmer as well. Now Emily will take you through the highlights of these new solutions.
Thanks, Alice. The data-led, feedback-based solutions that Alice has just shown you has differences as well as alignments, as you would expect, to kids' standard sizing. For example, total body height and posture is the same for standard and extended fit forms, unlike the previous fit tools. The height growth is nonlinear or not stair-step, as Alice has pointed out. The girth intervals, or how much the body circumference points of measure get bigger or smaller, have been vetted to the data and logically grow between the categories. Logically meaning that they will be translated well when you get to the garment grade process. Body shapes for extended sizes are quite different to the standard sizes, and over the size range, shape evolves to reflect that. Lastly, we've really put a lot of thought into how the body grows and how this will impact garment grade. That's always a challenge for people trying to reconcile body growth and garment grade, and we put a lot of thought in that to try to make your jobs a bit easier. Okay. So these new solutions also have some developments that we're really excited about. We've considered the whole development process by providing realistic boy-girl aligned dimensions for some of the extremities, and this is unusually practical for unisex products. Client feedback stressed a very strong desire for a couple of features, and we've been able to build those into the new fit form. First, we were requested to do a better way to fit close to the body product like jeans and leggings. What we're referring to as a denim rise has sculpting that provides this and results in a more natural leg stance. Secondly, we've engineered the forms to stand upright without the use of stand or pegs. So it looks like you'll have to go back to the gym instead of lifting the form on and off of the stand. So built with a combination of customer feedback, body scan data, and medical research, we feel that these fit forms are a technical tool that will work commercially no matter how your brand is working. For brands or vendor suppliers conducting garment evaluations, certainly a physical form can be used. Or if you're working in a digital platform, identical virtual alpha forms can work for most common 3D platforms. Garment grades map to the size range, which will be particularly useful for size run evaluation in a digital environment. And frankly, in kids, we find that this size run evaluation for things like graphic placement, scaling is going to be amazing to use these for. So just to sum up what we've talked about here. One, compared to the current sizing assumptions, today's kids are taller and are maturing at a quicker pace than previously acknowledged. Alvanon's new standards meet this reality and use realistic, nonlinear growth. Two, all category fit standards, plus husky, standard, and slim, are the same height at each age or size. Three, while every brand has its own preference for a core size, we feel that 12 is an excellent start point. It's the gateway to tween products, and it's a good basis for sizes below 12 in terms of how the body is evolving due to puberty. And lastly, point 4, unisex, team sports, and uniforms will really benefit from standards with aligned heads and hands in terms of their sizing and shape. So we all know that implementing and adjusting to new standards can be challenging and time consuming. We've all been there. Alvanon has helped many brands meet that challenge with our expertise and the tools we provide. So starting at 12 o'clock, essentially, we provide the core and jump size physical fit forms, of course. We're well known for that. Many of our clients are now getting into virtual alva forms, which, as we said, are going to be great for fitting size runs, graphic and design scaling. We have body growth charts and grade guidelines that map to all of our products, give you very detailed information on how the body is growing at every single size and multiple points of measurement. And then one really exciting thing that if you haven't tried it, I strongly suggest you go and take a look at Alvanon's online learning platform, Motif. That can provide additional training to individuals or teams from the comfort of your own desk. And of course, Alvanon's consulting team is happy to work with individual brands to help meet challenges on a one-to-one basis. So we have thrown a lot at you this morning, a lot of ideas coming out here, and as promised at the outset, we would love to answer any questions that you have.
Great. Thank you so much, Alice and Emily. We do have a couple of questions coming in now. First question is, we have a couple actually related to data. Somebody wanted to know, where's the data from? I guess the source of the data.
Emily, would you like to explain that to the team, to the group here?
Yeah, Kids data, of course, is challenging, and we really have a couple of sources that we've drawn from. Alvanon, of course, has several proprietary sources. Some of you out there may remember the Alva Kids app that we had a few years back. In addition to that, we also use pediatric medical data as well as the CDC. I think Alice and I have been to Google medical sites that we never dreamed in design school we would go to. So did a lot of research, looked at scholarly papers, as well as referring to our own body scan data.
Great, thank you. And then a follow-up question to that is, there are a couple questions inquiring about the age of the data. How old is the data you guys have used?
Why don't you keep going, Em?
Okay, so the age of the data is something that people always ask us about, and I really love the way Alice refers to this. And she says, you know, we're not evolving as a species, we're just evolving much more slowly. But the short answer here is that we have gathered our data within the past 5 years. So that in data world is very current. And just to provide context, sometimes we will run comparative models of the most current data to slightly older data to see what changes have happened. So was there a seismic shift that we've detected? Obesity being one of the seismic shifts that we've seen. And while we can see a slow uptick in things like body circumference due to North America's overweight issues, stature changes more slowly. The biggest question for the apparel industry is, what will any change mean to the standards we're actually using? And hopefully what we've shown here has given some guidelines for where we feel is a realistic picture of the North American child right now.
Great, thank you so much, Emily. Another question, somebody's inquiring about the brands. I'm not sure if we could talk too much of the brands, but somebody's asking, what brands did you talk to?
That's something where we were able to speak to them and for them to be quite open and honest with us. And because of how much they shared with us, we will not, we won't share exactly who they were out of respect for their cooperation and participation in the project.
Okay, great. Next question coming in. Are these standards for obese children?
No, we weren't really targeting, as we had mentioned, extremely overweight or obese children. This is a category that would need to be looked at separately, because the shape evolution that occurs when that happens is quite different even from overweight kids.
Great, thank you. Next question. How did you determine how big the standard should be compared to regular?
Emily, you want to answer that one?
Well, one thing we did was we filtered the data to understand the overall differences between regular kids and plus husky in terms of their size and shape at each age. And we wanted to ensure that there was enough difference to make them distinctly different from standard kids. Many of us in the apparel industry wrestle with how much is enough to make a significant difference so that it's worthwhile to use the SKUs that have been given to us, and why we've been realistic to the data. As we said, we balanced it against things like significant difference between body shapes and sizes, and what's actually actionable in terms of grade and operations.
Great, thank you. Another question. How does this data differ from the most recent ASTM standards for Plus, Husky, and Slim?
Well, I'll answer that one. They are quite a bit different in height in the middle childhood years. In the younger years, we didn't see a lot of difference between the more current data and the previous standards. When the ASTM standards were developed, there wasn't a lot of data available. So what we have is more current, and we have good sources to believe that the heights and the size of these kids is relevant and to the way kids are today.
Okay, great, thank you. Next question, does the data vary by geographical area? And then follow up, or demographic area?
The answer to that would be no. We didn't disaggregate the data by regions, and the Centers for Disease Control doesn't separate the data by regions or ethnicity either. What we did find in researching from medical sources is that there isn't a lot of difference among kids regionally in the United States, with the caveat that kids in the South and in the Midwest do tend to be heavier than kids on the coast, just like their adult counterparts. But a heavy kid in the South isn't going to be different from a heavy kid in New York City or California.
Great, really interesting. Next question, could you explain the data that has been done in North America versus Europe/UK versus Asia?
Emily, do you want to touch on that one?
Right now, we have a couple of initiatives underway at Alvanon, and Alice and I have been involved in them. One, we're redefining the body size and shape of the children's range in North America and in China. As a matter of fact, if you do business in China, we have a very interesting new look at the Chinese kids data coming out, I believe, mid to end of June and being presented in Shanghai. So that might be something of interest. So it's a whole new set of Chinese data. So we are sort of going region by region on demand to take a look at A, what data is out there, B, is there a hunger for new standards of some sort. We did take a look at Europe, and we found that there is not a huge appetite, for example, for change over there. And even though we have data from those regions that might support change, we don't know that we're seeing a strong pull for that right now. 2-3 years from now, absolutely that might be the case. So we have regional data. We're using the same methodology, body scan where we can get it, although as we said, kids are rarely body scanned. It's very unusual to get that, and in some cases you only have the parents' anecdotal information of what size their children are. So we've got that, and then of course the medical data is extremely helpful, but there are challenges using medical data that we've had a steep learning curve on, but feel like we've cracked the nut. So hopefully that answers that question.
Great, thank you. I would actually like to jump in. Also, if I may, if anybody is interested in some of the standards we're developing in Europe, UK, or Asia throughout the rest of the year, I would urge you to visit our website, alvanon.com, sign up for our newsletter. We have several more of these webinars planned to talk about the new standards that we're developing. And the best way to stay up to date is to visit our website, again, alvanon.com, and just sign up for our newsletter. And we'll send out regular updates, invites, registrations, and all that stuff. So thank you, Emily. Next question. What criteria do you use to define each size? Is it waist to height correlation or something else?
That's a really good question. We started actually with the Centers for Disease Control information that has excellent information on average heights per age range in the United States. And they're kind of the gold standard for understanding that. We also have our own scan data, as we said, on kids as young as 7 years old, which we cross-referenced against that, and we found that the sources corroborated each other. So we started by identifying and understanding what the heights were per age. And like we said, we found, that the data sources did corroborate each other and that there was no correlation between overall size and height at any given age. From there, we mapped back to our own scan data as well as some other sources to understand the posture and the shape and the stature distribution at each age.
Great, thank you, Alice. Next question. This came in. Does this mean, with these new standards, does this mean that separate sizes per gender are only necessary after about 12 years old?
No, that isn't really what we meant by that. We actually start gender specific sizes at 7. The reason we use 12 as our starting point or as a core size is because that's where you really see the the divergence between the shape in the genders really becoming more distinct. Obviously, as the younger they are, the more similar they are. And also because it's a good starting point for tween brands, because like we had mentioned, kids are changing shape at the same time that they're growing. Um, so trying to get your arms around what's a good starting place to make it possible for brands to grade up and down from that was part of the reason we chose that particular size.
It'll also depend on how broad the size range is for a brand. So for example, if a brand elects only to go up to size 14 or 16, you might want to downsize to a 10 or an 8. It just really depends on where you are. With the caveat being that if we're saying that gender differentiation becomes most visible at age 7 and your core size is 8, that might mean, well, if you're going all the way up to a 14, you're looking at something that was fairly ungender defined and then going up into the area where there is gender definition. So that's one thing where we would issue probably a caveat. Alice, do you agree with that, or are you in violent agreement?
I am not in violent disagreement. No, that's I think it sums it up perfectly.
Okay.
Great, thank you both. We have a whole bunch of questions coming in. Maybe we'll take a handful more. This next one is very enthusiastic. Hello! What about the situation for babies? Do you intend to expand your research on this market?
We don't have any plans at this time to look at extended sizes for babies. Um, there there may be some opportunity for it, but at this point in time, we really put our efforts at where we felt the market really needed standards that would serve them for extended sizes. In the babies, there's a little more flexibility and a little less diversity. Uh, so that's not on the agenda at this point in time.
But we should point out that when we redeveloped the North American standard size kids, we did a lot of work on babies down to newborn. So we feel like we've covered babies pretty well at standard size and really given it a good look, comparing it against medical data. And then what's kind of cool is our new Chinese babies are more linked to government sizing over there. So check those out if you do business in China.
Exactly. Good point, Em.
Great, thank you both. Next question. How does the growing issue of obesity in children affect the standards that have been established by Alvanon?
The standards that we've just developed are actually in response to the growing growing rates of obesity in the country. We've used recent data. That's why we cited so many medical sources, so we can see where this is going. So that awareness and the understanding that there's going to be a growing demand, even more so in the future, for plus and husky sizes is what prompted us to do this.
Great, thank you. Next question. It's actually a follow-up question. Second question. You mentioned that you changed the stance of the form to be able to stand on their own. Does that stance differ from the actual stance or posture of a child?
The stance that we've developed is actually more natural and true to the way children stand than the previous forms were.
Yeah, it should be pointed out too that we didn't do that solely so that they would stand independently. We did it to accommodate the denim sculpting, the rise there, so that you would be able to nicely fit and get the product on. And the stance was cause and effect of that.
Yes, that's particularly true in boys. You may have noticed that they are standing with their feet a little further apart, because the reality is that's how boys and men stand. They don't stand with their feet directly under their hips the way that girls do, or artificially the way that traditional forms do. So that's part of what drove it. And the posture that we developed is somewhat more natural and neutral and a little less artificially erect than a traditional dress form of the past.
Great, thank you both. I think maybe two or three more questions. Was the data used in this study isolated by children of different ethnicities in North America?
The short answer is no. Our data was not sorted by ethnicity. We have no way to identify it. And one of the articles that we read from the Centers for Disease Control was that they did not monitor height or growth development by ethnicity, because what they found is that nutrition is a much more accurate marker of understanding childhood development and growth and shape than ethnicity is.
Yeah, another thing we noted in one of the scholarly medical papers that we read, we did read about other ethnicities, of course, because there's such a large Latino presence in the United States. We read up a bit of the differences that might occur there, but we didn't feel that they were substantial enough to merit really skewing the body one way or another. I mean, this is kidswear that is specifically for kids generically. And then lastly, as someone who's done a lot of body scanning before, you can ask adults what their ethnic identification is, but that's not a question you can ask kids when you scan them. That's not done.
Great, yeah, thank you both. Another question, what are the changes between the North American standards and the US ASTM children? Does the new standard replace the US ASTM for regular kids in Canada?
Well, kids in Canada are very similar to kids in the United States. There isn't any evidence that you would need a different standard for Canada. In terms of replacing ASTM, we will still offer the ASTM standards for people that feel that they need them. It's not a replacement, but we do feel that it's a significant update to be more relevant and timely. The data is more timely. When ASTM was developed, there simply wasn't a lot of data available. They were building on existing notions of children sizes. And, at that point in time, it served the population and the market needs very well. But we were hearing loud and clear, with sort of a growing drumbeat, that it was time for things to be updated.
Great, thank you, Alice. And if you have questions about the differences in the standards, I would also urge you to, reach out to us, give us a call, and customer service would be happy to walk you through and distribute material if you have any questions to help kind of illustrate the differences in those standards and to better help you make the decision that you need to make and to decide on a standard. Maybe one more question. Actually, I think that's all the questions. That is all the questions, guys. Thank you so
Okay.
much. We'll get everybody out here a little bit early in time for lunch. Again, I don't know if you, Alice, Emily, if you had any final notes that you wanted to address.
I think Alice is going to flip to the next pages, which will show you the global context to get a hold of. You probably recognize these individuals pretty well, working in your region. So give them a call. I know sometimes people ask why we're not showing the actual measurements here, because to be honest with you, pages and pages and pages of measurement on the screen is just really difficult to look at and unappealing. And our team of sales directors can help you get better visibility to those.
Great, and thank you everybody again for tuning in. As I mentioned, we recorded the webinar. We have collected your questions. We will distribute those, get some answers from the consultants, and so we will distribute, hopefully early next week. You can expect those. Tuesday, we're on vacation here in the States on Monday. We will distribute the recording of the webinar as well as the Q&A portion here to everybody that attended and registered for the webinar. If you enjoyed the webinar, please, again, visit our website, alvanon.com. That's alvanon.com, and sign up for our newsletter. We'd love to stay in touch, and it's the best way for you to stay up to date on all of the initiatives and events that we have coming up. For example, we will be in San Francisco in September for our Alvanon workshop. We encourage you to check that out if you're in the area around that time. You can also visit our website and take a look at our previous North American Kids Shaping the Future of Fit webinar, which this webinar is a follow-up to that initial webinar. So that is live on our website now. You can go take a look at that and really dive into the kids standards that we're developing for North America. Thank you all again for joining, and have a great day.